The unwanted gift. The great hall of the Terran Alliance sparkled under crystal chandeliers as the Celestian delegation approached. The aliens moved with ethereal grace, their iridescent skin catching the light like polished opals. At their center walked Princess Lyra, her silver ceremonial robes flowing behind her, hands bound with golden chains, not as a prisoner, but as a symbol of her transfer of allegiance. Admiral Helena Voss watched with narrowed eyes from her position beside the Alliance Council. This wasn't a diplomatic gesture, it was a disposal. Esteemed leaders of humanity, the Celestian High Chancellor began, his melodic voice carrying through the hall. We present Princess Lyra of House Solara as a token of our desire for continued peace between our species. The princess stood perfectly still, her luminescent eyes downcast. 4 faint, glowing marks on her neck, the royal birthmarks of the Celestian royal family, pulsed with a soft blue light, the only sign of her inner turmoil. And what exactly prompts such generosity? Admiral Voss asked, her voice sharp. The Chancellor's smile didn't reach his eyes. An alliance through union has long been a tradition across the galaxy. Admiral Voss stepped forward. And yet you offer your princess without requesting one of our own in return. Curious. The tension in the room thickened. The Celestians weren't known for their generosity. Every gift came with expectations or hidden motives. Our traditions differ from yours, the Chancellor replied smoothly. Princess Lyra will serve as cultural ambassador between our peoples. Admiral Voss glanced at Lyra. The princess hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, like a statue carved from living moonlight. The Alliance accepts this gesture, Council Leader Marcus finally declared. We hope it strengthens the bonds between our worlds. The Chancellor bowed and turned to leave without so much as a farewell to the princess. His delegation followed, their relief palpable as the doors closed behind them. The hall fell silent. Lyra remained motionless, as if waiting for commands. Admiral Voss sighed and turned to the man at her side. Commander Reeves, she's your responsibility now. Commander Jack Reeves stiffened. Ma'am, you heard me. Find her quarters. Make sure she's settled. She's not a prisoner, but she's not free to wander our facilities unsupervised either. Jack suppressed a groan. With all due respect, Admiral, I'm a combat officer, not a babysitter. Voss's expression softened slightly. Look at her, Jack. The Celestians didn't send her here as an honor. They sent her because they had no use for her. I need someone I can trust to handle this. Delicately, Jack glanced at Lyra, who stood alone in the center of the hall as officials filed out around her. He recognized the look in her eyes now. Resignation. The complete surrender of someone who had accepted their fate long ago. Fine, he muttered, but I'm not changing my mission schedule. Wouldn't dream of it, Voss replied with a hint of a smile. Just don't let her start an interstellar incident. Jack approached the princess cautiously. Up close, her alienness was more pronounced. The faintly luminescent skin, the slightly elongated fingers, the complete absence of hair, replaced by those glowing markings that extended from her temples down her neck. Princess Lyra, he said formally, I'm Commander Jack Reeves. I'll be your guide during your stay with us. Lyra finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were the deepest violet he'd ever seen, with no whites or pupils, just swirling depths of color. I am at your service, Commander, she replied, her voice like wind chimes. Please direct me as you see fit. Jack ran a hand through his dark hair. Right. First things first, let's get those chains off. He gestured to the golden bindings around her wrists. Lyra looked surprised. These are symbolic of my station and gift status. It would be improper. We don't do gift status here, Jack interrupted. On Earth, chains are for prisoners or pets. You're neither. He pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket and carefully cut through the golden links. They fell to the floor with a musical chime. There, he said, tucking the tool away. First lesson about humans. We value freedom, even symbolically. Lyra stared at her bare wrists. I do not understand. How am I to know my purpose without bonds? Jack sighed. This was going to be more complicated than he thought. You'll figure it out as you go. Come on, let's get you settled. The military compound where Jack was stationed was a sprawling complex of training facilities, barracks, and operations centers. He led Lyra to the officers' quarters, where a small apartment had been hastily prepared for her. It's not exactly royal accommodations, Jack said as he opened the door, but it's private and secure. Lyra stepped inside, examining the simple furnishings with curiosity. It is colorful, she finally said. Jack glanced around at the standard-issue furniture. If this is colorful, I'd hate to see what your home looked like. The royal house of Solera is white crystal and silver metal, Lyra explained. Colors are considered distractions from duty and protocol. Sounds cheerful, Jack muttered. Look, I have duties to attend to. The bathroom's through there, he pointed. Food will be delivered shortly, and there's a terminal if you need to access basic information. Lyra nodded obediently. One more thing, Jack added, pausing at the door. You're not a prisoner here. The door doesn't lock from the outside. But for your safety and ours, please don't wander without an escort for now. I understand, Commander. I will await your instructions. Jack frowned. No, that's not. He sighed. Just get some rest. I'll check on you tomorrow. As the door closed behind him, Jack leaned against the wall of the corridor. What had Voss gotten him into? He was a soldier, not a cultural liaison or royal handler. He pulled out his comm unit and called up his second-in-command. Martinez, I need you to dig up everything we have on Celestian royalty, especially anything about Princess Lyra of House Solera. The gift princess. Martinez's voice came through. Already on it. Sir, figured you'd want a full profile. Should have something for you by morning. Good man, Jack replied. And Martinez, find out why they really sent her here. Nobody gives away royalty without a reason. The file waiting for Jack the next morning was thin but revealing. Princess Lyra, third daughter of Emperor Solaris EX, had been destined for a political marriage to cement ties with another stellar nation. Until medical examinations had revealed she was infertile, a critical failing in a culture where royalty was expected to continue bloodlines. She was going to be married off to the Proximan Confederacy, Martins explained as Jack scanned the file. When they discovered she couldn't bear children, the arrangement was canceled. Her status at court plummeted overnight. Jack frowned. So they pawned her off on us instead. Essentially, the Celestians consider her defective. A royal who can't continue the bloodline has no value in their hierarchy. Jack closed the file, disgust churning in his stomach. They treat their own royalty like breeding stock. Different culture, different values. Martinez shrugged. At least she's not being executed. Some species would consider that mercy. Mercy would be letting her choose her own life. Jack muttered, standing up. I'll see you at training. The new recruits need to be whipped into shape before deployment. When Jack visited Lyra later that day, he found her exactly where he'd left her, sitting by the window, her silver robes unchanged. Have you been sitting there all night? He asked incredulously. Lyra turned to him, her expression neutral. I was instructed to await your return, Commander. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. That's not what I... Never mind. First order of business, you need earth clothes. Those robes are impractical here. Lyra looked down at her formal attire. These are appropriate for my station. Your station has changed, Jack said bluntly. And if you're going to be living among humans, you need to adapt. He tossed a package onto the bed. These should fit. Captain Rivera's about your size, and she donated some basics. Get change. We're going for a walk. Lyra hesitated, then nodded and took the package. As you command. It's not a command, it's a suggestion, Jack corrected with exasperation. And that's another thing. Stop treating everything I say as an order. She tilted her head, confusion evident in her violet eyes. "How am I to know your wishes if you do not command me?" "By using your own judgment," Jack replied, "which means you need to start thinking for yourself." Lyra's luminescent markings pulsed faster. Such behavior would be considered defiance on Celestia. "Well, you're not on Celestia anymore." Jack gestured to the bathroom. "Go change. I'll wait here." When Lyra emerged wearing standard-issue black pants and a simple blue shirt, she looked simultaneously more human and somehow more alien. Without the concealing robes, her slender frame and slightly inhuman proportions were more evident. "These garments are functional," she said, tugging at the unfamiliar fabric. "That's military issue for you," Jack replied. "Come on, time for a tour." As they walked through the compound, Lyra attracted curious stares. Most humans had seen Celestians in diplomatic broadcasts, but few had encountered one in person, especially not dressed in human clothing. "This is the training field," Jack explained as they reached a large open area where soldiers were engaged in combat drills. "This is where I spend most of my time." Lyra watched the sparring soldiers with obvious fascination. "Your people train females as warriors?" "Of course," Jack replied. "Some of our best fighters are women." Lyra's markings pulsed with interest. "On Celestia, females are prohibited from combat roles. We are considered too valuable for reproduction." Jack winced at her matter-of-fact tone. "Well, that explains a lot," he muttered. "Explains what, Commander?" Jack hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Why they sent you away. I know about your condition." Lyra stiffened, her markings dimming slightly. "I see. You have been informed of my defect." "It's not a defect," Jack said firmly. "And it's not your defining characteristic. Here, your worth isn't measured by your ability to reproduce." Lyra stared at him, clearly struggling to comprehend. "Then how is a female's value determined?" "The same way anyone's is. By your actions, your character, your contributions." Jack gestured to the training field. "Want to try?" Lyra's eyes widened. "You would teach me to fight." "Why not? Might help you figure out who you want to be, now that you're free of Celestian expectations." "Free." Lyra repeated the word as if tasting it for the first time. "I am free." Jack nodded. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. You get to decide your path now." For the first time since her arrival, Lyra's face showed genuine emotion, wonder mixed with fear. "I do not know how to choose for myself," she admitted quietly. Jack smiled. "Then that's where we'll start." Over the following weeks, Lyra began to transform. Jack started her with basic self-defense, then moved to more advanced combat techniques as she showed remarkable aptitude. Her Celestian physiology gave her advantages: quicker reflexes, enhanced agility, but it was her determination that impressed him most. One morning, Jack arrived at the training field to find Lyra already there, practicing forms with the training staff. Her movements were fluid, precise, almost hypnotic. When she spotted him, she stopped, inclining her head slightly. "Commander," she greeted him. Her formal manner remained, but there was a new confidence in her stance. "You're early," Jack observed, pleased. "I wish to improve," she replied simply. Jack noted the speech pattern. Not "I was instructed," or "it was required," but "I wished." Progress. "Well, let's see what you've got," he said, picking up a staff of his own. They circled each other slowly. Jack struck first, a testing blow that Lyra parried easily. She countered with a swift jab that he barely blocked. "Good," he approved. "Now don't hold back." The sparring intensified, staffs clacking loudly in the morning air. Jack found himself genuinely working to keep up with her. When he finally called a halt, they were both breathing hard. "You're learning fast," he said appreciatively. Lyra's markings pulsed with what he now recognized as pleasure. "I have an excellent teacher." Jack found himself smiling. It was hard to remember now how rigid and emotionless he had seemed at first. Every day, more of her true personality emerged as she shed the constraints of her upbringing. Their moment was interrupted by Martinez jogging towards them, his expression grim. "Commander, we've got a situation. The Celestian delegation is back. They're demanding to speak with Princess Lyra." Jack turned to Lyra, whose markings had dimmed with alarm. "Did you know they were coming?" She shook her head. "No, this is unexpected." Jack's protective instincts flared. "Martinez, tell them the princess is engaged in training activities and will receive them in 1 hour. In the meantime, find out exactly what they want." After Martinez departed, Jack turned to Lyra. "You don't have to see them if you don't want to." Lyra straightened, gripping her staff tighter. "No, I will face them, but not as I was." She looked at her human clothing, then at Jack. "I am different now." Jack nodded, surprising himself with the fierce pride he felt. "Yes, you are." The Celestian Chancellor's disapproval was palpable as Lyra entered the meeting room dressed in a Terran Alliance uniform, her once long ceremonial locks now cut short in a practical style similar to female Earth soldiers. "Princess Lyra," he said coldly, "you dishonor your house with this display." Lyra stood tall, her violet eyes level with his. "I honor my new position, Chancellor, as cultural ambassador to the Terran Alliance." Jack stood slightly behind her, ready to intervene if necessary, but determined to let her handle this herself. Admiral Voss watched from the side, her expression carefully neutral. "You were sent to strengthen ties between our peoples," the Chancellor hissed, "not to adopt their barbaric practices. We have received reports that you engage in combat training, like a common soldier." "I engage in many human customs," Lyra replied evenly. "It helps me understand their culture." "It is not your place to understand. It is your place to represent Celestian values and traditions." Lyra's markings flashed briefly with anger, an emotion she would have been forbidden to display on Celestia. "And what values are those, Chancellor?" "The ones that declared me worthless because I cannot bear children. The ones that sent me away like unwanted cargo." The Chancellor recoiled as if slapped. "You forget yourself, Princess. Your father could recall you for such insolence." For the first time, fear flickered across Lyra's face. Jack stepped forward. "The princess is under Terran Alliance protection now," he stated firmly. "Any attempt to remove her against her will would constitute a breach of the peace agreement." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "This matter is not finished. We did not gift a royal daughter to have her transformed into a soldier. Emperor Solaris will hear of this development." He turned to leave, his entourage following in his wake. When they had gone, Admiral Voss approached Lyra. "Well handled, Princess. But be prepared. They won't let this go easily." Lyra's composure faltered slightly. "Will they truly try to take me back?" Voss glanced at Jack, who had moved protectively closer to Lyra. "They might. But Commander Reeves is right. You're under our protection now." After Voss departed, Lyra turned to Jack, her violet eyes troubled. "I have created complications for you." Jack smiled reassuringly. "You stood up for yourself. I'd say that's worth a few complications." Lyra hesitated, then slowly reached out and touched his arm, the first time she had initiated physical contact. "Thank you, Jack, for showing me that I could be more than what they made me." Jack felt a strange tightness in his chest at the sound of his first name on her lips. "You were always more, Lyra. You just needed the chance to discover it." As they walked back to the training fields together, Jack realized with startling clarity that his feelings for the alien princess had evolved far beyond duty or even friendship, and from the way her markings pulsed with a soft rose hue whenever their eyes met, he suspected he wasn't alone in this unexpected development. The impossible hair. 6 months after Princess Lyra's arrival on Earth, Commander Jack Reeves found himself facing a realization he could no longer deny. He had fallen in love with her. The revelation wasn't sudden but had grown gradually, nurtured by countless hours of training together, sharing meals, and late-night conversations where Lyra's curiosity about human culture never seemed to diminish. "Your species has over 6,000 languages," she marveled one evening as they sat on the roof of the compound, watching the sunset. "Celestians have only one." "Enforced uniformity?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer. Lyra nodded, her newly grown hair, a development that had both surprised and delighted her, shifting in the breeze. Linguistic deviation was considered potentially divisive to the Empire, like most forms of individuality. Jack watched her profile against the orange sky. She had changed so much from the rigid, formal princess who had arrived in chains. Now she moved with confidence, spoke her mind freely, and had even developed a subtle sense of humor. "Jack," she said suddenly, turning to face him, "I have been studying human relationship customs." He nearly choked on his coffee. "Have you now?" "Yes. They are complex and often contradictory, but I believe I understand the concept of romantic attachment." Her violet eyes held his steadily. "I believe I feel such an attachment to you." Jack set down his mug carefully. "Lyra, if I have misinterpreted, please correct me," she continued, her markings pulsing rapidly with what he now recognized as nervousness. "I understand that cross-species relationships are uncommon but not unprecedented in human society." "You haven't misinterpreted," Jack said quietly, reaching for her hand. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, smooth like polished stone. "I felt the same way for some time now." "Then why have you not initiated courtship rituals?" she asked with genuine confusion. Jack laughed despite himself. "Because I'm your designated guardian. Because you're a princess from another world. Because until recently, you were still adjusting to life here. Take your pick." Lyra considered this, then leaned forward with deliberate intent. "I am adjusted now." Their first kiss was gentle, exploratory, the meeting of two worlds. When they parted, Lyra's markings were glowing with a vibrant rose hue Jack had never seen before. "I take it that's a good sign," he murmured. "It is, beyond words," she replied softly. Their relationship developed quietly at first. Although interspecies relations weren't forbidden in the Alliance military, a commander becoming involved with an alien princess who had been essentially gifted to humanity was politically complicated. Admiral Voss summoned Jack to her office after rumors began circulating. "I won't insult you by asking if the rumors are true," she said without preamble. "But I will ask if you thought this through." Jack stood at ease, meeting her gaze directly. "Yes, Mom. The Celestians won't like it. They gave her away because they considered her flawed, not because they wanted her to find happiness with a human. With all due respect, Admiral, what the Celestians want stopped mattering the moment they abandoned her here." Voss sighed, leaning back in her chair. "She's changed you, Jack. I'm not saying that's bad, just unexpected." Jack couldn't deny it. The cynical, by-the-book officer he'd been had softened around the edges. "She reminds me there's more to life than duty and protocol." Ironic, coming from a princess raised on nothing, but Voss observed with a hint of amusement. "Just be careful, both of you. The political situation with the Celestian Empire is fragile at best." Jack nodded. "Understood, Mom." 3 months into their relationship, Lyra began experiencing unusual symptoms: dizziness, fatigue, and strange fluctuations in her bioluminescent markings. Concerned, Jack insisted she visit the medical bay. Dr. Sharma, the Alliance's xenobiology specialist, ran extensive tests while Jack waited anxiously outside. When the doctor finally emerged, her expression was one of complete bewilderment. "Commander, I need to speak with both of you," she said, ushering him into the private exam room, where Lyra sat on the edge of a medical bed, her markings pulsing with an unfamiliar pattern. "What's wrong?" Jack asked, immediately moving to Lyra's side. Dr. Sharma shook her head slowly. "Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just impossible." She turned to Lyra. "Princess, you're pregnant." Stunned silence filled the room. "That's not possible," Jack finally said. Celestian and human DNA aren't compatible. And Lyra was diagnosed as infertile. Infertile with Celestian males, Dr. Sharma corrected. And yes, our species shouldn't be genetically compatible, but she displayed a holographic scan showing a small, developing embryo. The evidence suggests otherwise. Lyra stared at the image, her markings pulsing rapidly. "A child," she whispered. "My child. Our child." Jack felt dizzy with shock and something else, a fierce, protective joy that took his breath away. "How?" he managed. Dr. Sharma shrugged helplessly. "I have theories, but nothing concrete. Princess Lyra's infertility, by Celestian standards, might actually have been a genetic mutation that paradoxically makes her more compatible with human DNA. Or perhaps Celestians and humans share more genetic history than we realized." Jack barely heard the explanations, his focus entirely on Lyra's face. Awestruck, joyful, transformed. "Are they both healthy?" he asked. "As far as I can tell, yes," Dr. Sharma replied. "But this is unprecedented. We'll need to monitor the pregnancy carefully." Lyra looked up at Jack, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Another new development since coming to Earth. "A child," she repeated. "Something I never thought possible." Jack took her hand, his throat tight with emotion. "We'll figure this out together." News of the pregnancy spread quickly through the Alliance Command. Admiral Voss immediately classified the information, but not before a communications officer with Celestian sympathies leaked the report directly to the Imperial Palace. The response was swift and alarming. "They're sending a battlecruiser," Martinez reported grimly during an emergency briefing. Official reason: to ensure the well-being of Princess Lyra and retrieve her for specialized medical care. Jack's hands clenched into fists. "They want to take her back." Admiral Voss nodded. "More precisely, they want to study her and the child. The first viable human-Celestian hybrid would be of immense scientific and political value to them." "She's not going," Jack stated flatly. "She's not their property." "I agree," Voss said, surprising him. "But we need to handle this diplomatically. A direct confrontation with a Celestian battlecruiser could spark an interstellar incident." "What are our options?" Jack asked. Voss brought up a holographic display of Earth's defensive grid. "We've increased security around the base. The Celestians won't risk a direct assault on an Alliance military installation. That would be an act of war. But they'll try other methods," Martinez warned. "Infiltration, deception, perhaps even offering diplomatic concessions in exchange for the princess." "Where is Lyra now?" Voss asked. "Secure quarters with a full security detail," Jack replied. "She knows what's happening." Voss nodded. "Good. Now we need a more permanent solution before that battlecruiser arrives in 3 days." Jack found Lyra in their quarters, sitting by the window, her hand resting protectively over her abdomen. Her expression was distant, troubled. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. "You okay?" She turned to him, her violet eyes clouded with worry. "They will never stop hunting us now, Jack. This child changes everything for them." "We won't let them take you," Jack promised. "Either of you." Lyra's markings pulsed with anxiety. "You don't understand. In Celestian history, there has never been a successful cross-species birth. My father would sacrifice anything to possess such power, the ability to expand the empire through genetic integration rather than conquest." Jack took her hands in his. "Lyra, I need to ask you something important." He took a deep breath. "If you could choose your future, right now, what would you want?" She didn't hesitate. "A life with you. And our child. Free from the Empire's control." Jack nodded, his decision crystallizing. "Then we need to make that happen. Permanently." "How?" "There's a provision in Alliance law. If you formally request political asylum and renounce your royal status, the Celestians would have no legal claim on you. You'd become a protected citizen of the Terran Alliance." Lyra's eyes widened. "Renounce my royal bloodline. It has never been done in all of Celestian history." First time for everything, Jack said with a small smile. But it has to be your choice. Lyra was silent for a long moment, her markings shifting through patterns of thought. Finally, she looked up, her eyes clear and determined. My royal blood brought me nothing but pain and rejection. Here with you, I found value beyond bloodlines. She placed a hand over her abdomen. And now, together, we've created something the Empire deemed impossible. Yes, Jack, I choose freedom. The formal asylum request was processed immediately, with Admiral Voss personally expediting the paperwork. A public announcement was made, ensuring that diplomatic channels across the galaxy would receive word before the Celestian battlecruiser arrived. 2 days later, a communication came from the approaching vessel. They're requesting visual contact with Princess Lyra, Communications Officer Chen reported. Admiral Voss glanced at Jack and Lyra, who stood side by side in the command center. Your call, Princess. Lyra squared her shoulders. I will speak with them. The view screen flickered to life, revealing not the Chancellor as expected, but Emperor Solaris himself. His golden eyes burned with cold fury, his royal markings pulsing with aggressive patterns. Daughter, he said, the word dripping with contempt. You have brought shame upon our house. Lyra stood tall, her hand finding Jack's beside her. Father, I have found my true purpose. By breeding with a human. The Emperor sneered. By betraying your heritage, you will return to Celestia immediately for medical examination and purification. No, Lyra replied simply. I have been granted asylum by the Terran Alliance. I am no longer subject to Imperial authority. The Emperor's markings flashed dangerously. You cannot pronounce what flows in your veins. The child you carried is of royal blood, my bloodline. It belongs to the Empire. Jack stepped forward. With respect, Emperor, the child is half human and will be born under Alliance protection. Your claims have no legal standing here. You dare address me, human. The Emperor hissed. You who corrupted a princess of Celestia. Your Majesty, Admiral Voss interrupted smoothly. Perhaps you should review the interstellar law regarding asylum seekers before making threats. Princess Lyra's status is legally established and recognized by the Galactic Council. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. This is not finished. The Empire does not relinquish what is ours. I was never yours, Lyra said quietly. I was only ever a tool to you, one you discarded when you thought me broken. She placed a hand over her abdomen. But I was not broken. I was meant for a different path. With a final glare of pure hatred, the Emperor terminated the connection. The command center was silent for a long moment. They won't give up, Martins warned. They'll try other methods. And we'll be ready, Voss replied firmly. Princess Lyra and her child are under Alliance protection now, permanently. 5 months later, under the careful supervision of Dr. Sharma and a team of xenobiological specialists, Lyra gave birth to a daughter. The child was extraordinary, with skin that held a subtle luminescence and tiny markings that pulsed with light along her temples, but otherwise remarkably human in appearance. She's perfect, Jack whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. The infant's eyes, when they opened, were a deep violet like her mother's, but with distinct pupils and irises. Lyra smiled tiredly from the medical bed. She is the beginning of something new. Neither fully Celestian nor fully human, but something more. News of the successful birth spread rapidly throughout the Alliance and beyond. Scientific communities clamored for information about the child whose existence challenged long-held beliefs about genetic compatibility between species. Political analysts debated the implications for human-Celestian relations. The Celestian Empire maintained an ominous silence. A month after the birth, Admiral Voss visited them in their new home, a secure residence on the Alliance base. She's remarkable, Voss said, watching the infant sleep in her crib, her tiny markings glowing softly in the dimmed light. Have you chosen a name? Nova, Lyra answered. In your language, it means a new star, a bright beginning. Voss nodded approvingly. Fitting. She turned to face them both. I have news. The Celestian Emperor has officially disowned you, Lyra. You've been struck from the royal records. Jack tensed. Is that a threat or a concession? Both, most likely, Voss replied. They're acknowledging they can't legally reclaim you, but they're also severing any obligation to protect you as royalty. Lyra's expression remained calm. I expected nothing less. My father cannot accept failure. He can only erase it. There's more, Voss continued. We've detected increased Celestian intelligence activity near Earth. Nothing overt, but they're watching. Jack moved protectively closer to the crib. They still want her. Of course they do, Voss agreed. Nova represents something revolutionary, proof that our species can integrate on the most fundamental level. The strategic implications alone are enormous. What do you recommend? Jack asked. Voss straightened. The Alliance Council has approved a special assignment for you, Commander. We're establishing a new research outpost on Proxima Centauri V. Officially, you'll be head of security. Unofficially, you'll be far from Celestian reach while still under Alliance protection. Jack glanced at Lyra, who nodded slightly. When do we leave? He asked. 2 weeks. The mission is classified. Knowledge of your destination will be restricted to essential personnel only. After Voss left, Jack and Lyra stood together over their daughter's crib, watching her sleep peacefully, unaware of the political storms swirling around her existence. She will never know the constraints I grew up with, Lyra murmured. She will choose her own path. Jack put his arm around Lyra, drawing her close. She'll have the best of both worlds, Celestian